When Meadow Walker lost her father, one man became her true support. Vin Diesel, Paula's best friend and on-screen brother, promised to always be there for her and support her like a daughter. His loyalty has been tested over the years, and when her wedding day came, it was Vin who played the most important role, walking her down the aisle. This is a story about true friendship, family values, and love that does not depend on blood ties. Vin Diesel sat in his trailer, staring at the framed photo of Paul Walker that sat on the small wooden table in front of him. The image, captured years ago on the set of Fast and Furious, showed them laughing. Two brothers, not by blood but by choice. Vin exhaled slowly, gripping the frame tightly, feeling the weight of the moment pressing against his chest. He had made a promise, and he wasn't the kind of man to break one, especially not to Paul. Meadow Walker had just turned 15 when her world changed forever. The loss of her father left an unimaginable void, a space so vast and hollow that nothing seemed capable of filling it. The media swarmed, headlines speculated, but through it all, one truth remained. She was now navigating life without the one person who had always been her guiding light. Vin had always been close to Paul, their connection deepening over years of working side by side, pushing the limits of speed and adrenaline, both on screen and off. But it wasn't just a work relationship. It was a bond built on trust, mutual respect, and an unwavering belief in the importance of family. And family, to Vin Diesel, meant everything. In the days following Paul's passing, Vin found himself drawn to Meadow. She had inherited her father's kindness, his quiet strength, and most of all, his heart. She was lost in a world that suddenly felt too big, too empty. She needed someone, and Vin knew he had to step in. The first time he visited her, he hesitated outside the door, unsure of what to say, how to begin. What could he offer in the face of such loss? But when Meadow opened the door, eyes red-rimmed, looking smaller than he had ever seen her, the answer became clear. "Hey, kid," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. She stared at him for a long moment, then stepped forward, wrapping her arms around his waist. She didn't say a word, but she didn't need to. Vin hugged her back, holding her tightly, silently promising that he would always be there. From that moment on, Vin became a constant presence in Meadow's life. He never tried to replace Paul. No one could, but he became something else entirely, a guardian, a mentor, and above all, family. In the following months, Vin and Meadow built a routine. He would check in on her every day, making sure she was eating, sleeping, and, when she was ready, helping her find purpose again. At first, it was just quiet conversations, memories of Paul, funny stories from Fast and Furious sets, small moments that brought brief smiles to her face. Then, as time passed, Meadow began to open up about her dreams. She wanted to make a difference in the world, just like her father had. Paul had always been passionate about ocean conservation, and Meadow wanted to continue that legacy. Vince supported her in every way he could, connecting her with organizations, helping her navigate her newfound role in charity work, and most importantly, reminding her that she wasn't alone. One evening, as they sat outside under a sky painted in warm hues of orange and purple, Meadow turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he'd be proud of me?" Vin didn't hesitate. "He'd be more than proud, Meadow. He'd be amazed." She nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I miss him so much." "I know," Vin said, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "I do too. But he's still here, in everything you do. In everything we do." That night, as Meadow rested her head on his shoulder, Vin realized just how much she had grown, how much strength she had found despite everything. And in that moment, he knew that his promise to Paul wasn't just about protecting Meadow. It was about helping her find her own way, her own path, while always knowing she had someone to lean on. Years passed, and Meadow blossomed into a confident, compassionate young woman. She carried her father's legacy with pride, working on environmental causes, modeling, and building a life that honored both his memory and her own ambitions. Vin watched with quiet pride, always in the background, always ready to support her whenever she needed him. Then one day, she called him with news that made his heart pause. "I'm getting married, Uncle Vin." The words hit him with a wave of emotions, pride, joy, and an ache deep within his chest. "That's amazing, Meadow," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so happy for you." There was a long pause on the other end before she finally spoke again. "I was wondering, would you walk me down the aisle?" Vin felt his throat tighten, a lump forming that he struggled to swallow. It was a question he had never expected, but the answer was immediate, undeniable. "Of course, Meadow. It would be my honor." And just like that, the promise he had made all those years ago found its most profound fulfillment. Vin Diesel had stepped in as family when she needed him most, and now, as she prepared to start a new chapter of her life, he would stand by her side once again. Because family wasn't just about blood. It was about love, about showing up, about never letting go. The morning of the wedding arrived with a golden sunrise breaking over the horizon, casting warm hues across the sky. Vin Diesel stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. His reflection stared back at him, older, wiser, but carrying a heart full of emotions that words could hardly capture. Today wasn't just another day. Today, he was about to fulfill the most meaningful promise he had ever made. Meadow Walker was getting married, and Vin was the one who would walk her down the aisle. For years, he had watched her grow from a grieving teenager into a strong, independent woman. She had found her place in the world, carrying her father's legacy with grace, while also forging her own path. But no matter how much time had passed, she was still the girl who had once clung to him for comfort, the girl he had sworn to protect. And today, she was stepping into a new chapter of her life. A gentle knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Uncle?" Meadow's voice was soft, almost hesitant. He turned, his heart tightening at the sight of her standing there in her wedding dress. She looked stunning, her beauty radiating from within. But what caught Vin the most was the way her eyes shimmered, not just with joy, but with something deeper, something unspoken. It was the look of a girl who had faced loss, had endured, and had come out stronger on the other side. "Wow, vabreted, stepin closer. Paul would be so proud of you, Meadow." She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You think so?" "I know so," he assured her, gently wiping the tear away. "And today, I get to do something he would have wanted more than anything." She took a deep breath and reached for his hand. "I couldn't imagine anyone else walking me down the aisle. You've been there for me through everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." Vin squeezed her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "That's what family does, Meadow, and you will always be family." The ceremony was set in a picturesque garden, sunlight streaming through the trees, casting a warm glow over the gathered guests. Close friends and family filled the rows, their faces alight with anticipation. As the music began to play, a hush fell over the crowd. Vin took a deep breath as he held Meadow's hand, feeling her grip tighten slightly. "You ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, her eyes glistening. "As long as you're with me." They took the first step, moving in perfect harmony. The world seemed to slow as they walked down the aisle together. Every step was a testament to the journey they had taken, through loss, through healing, through years of unwavering support. It was a moment of pure love, not bound by blood but by choice. As they reached the altar, Vin looked at the man waiting for Meadow with nothing but pride in his heart. He knew she had found someone who would love and cherish her the way she deserved. He gently lifted her veil, kissing her forehead. "Your dad is right here with you," he whispered, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling within him. "And he couldn't be happier." Meadow nodded, squeezing his hand one last time before stepping forward to begin the next chapter of her life. After the ceremony, as laughter and music filled the air, Vin found a quiet moment to himself. He gazed up at the sky, feeling a familiar presence beside him. "We did it, brother," he murmured. "She's happy. She's safe. Just like I promised." A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, as if carrying an unseen response. Vin smiled, knowing deep down that Paul was watching, proud as ever. Because family, true family, never fades. It only grows stronger with time. The wedding reception was in full swing. Laughter echoed through the open-air venue, where golden lights twinkled above tables adorned with white roses. Meadow Walker stood beside her new husband, her face beaming with joy, while Vin Diesel watched from a distance, savoring the moment like a proud guardian. He had done his part. He had kept his promise. But tonight, as the celebration unfolded, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still one final thing left to do. Meadow caught his eye from across the room and smiled. She walked over, still glowing from the magic of the ceremony. "Uncle Vin," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "You okay?" Vin chuckled, shaking his head. "Meadow, this is your night. I should be asking you that." She sighed, glancing out at the dance floor where guests swayed to soft music. "I am happy," she admitted, "but something feels incomplete." Vin raised an eyebrow. "Incomplete? You just got married to a great guy, and you're surrounded by love. What could be missing?" Meadow hesitated before responding, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wish my dad was here." The words pierced Vin's heart in a way he wasn't prepared for. He knew this moment would come, but no amount of preparation could lessen its impact. He wrapped an arm around Meadow's shoulders, pulling her into a hug. "He is here," Vin assured her. "He's been here all day. In the wind, in the sun, in the love around us. And he's damn proud of you." She nodded against his chest, blinking back tears. "I know," she whispered, "but I still wish he could have danced with me tonight." Vin pulled back slightly, tilting his head. An idea flickered in his mind. "Who says he can't?" Meadow frowned in confusion as Vin turned toward the DJ booth and gave a small nod. Within moments, the music shifted, and a familiar melody filled the air, one of Paul Walker's favorite songs. Guests turned to see what was happening as Vin extended a hand to Meadow. "May I have this dance?" he asked with a gentle smile. Meadow's lips parted in surprise, her eyes glistening. Without hesitation, she took his hand, and together they stepped onto the dance floor. The crowd parted, watching in reverent silence as the two swayed to the rhythm. Meadow rested her head against Vin's shoulder, allowing the moment to envelop her. She closed her eyes, imagining, just for a moment, that her father was there, guiding her in spirit. Vin held her securely, his grip firm but tender. He knew this was the closest thing to a father-daughter dance she would ever have, and he wanted to make it count. When the song ended, the entire reception erupted in applause. Meadow wiped at her tears, laughing through the emotion. "Thank you, Uncle Vin," she said, voice cracking with sentiment. "That meant everything." Vin smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Anything for you, kiddo. Always." The rest of the evening continued in a blur of happiness, laughter, and love. But for Meadow, one moment stood out above all others. The moment when her father's best friend stepped up, once again proving that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters most. And Vin Diesel had always been there. The wedding celebration slowly faded into cherished memories. But for Vin Diesel, the promise he had made to Paul Walker was never just about one night. It was about a lifetime of being there for Meadow, ensuring she never felt alone in the world. In the days following the wedding, Vin found himself reflecting on everything that had led them to this moment. From the first time he had held Meadow's tiny hand after Paul was no longer there, to watching her grow into a strong, compassionate woman, it had been a journey filled with both sorrow and triumph. Now, with Meadow starting a new chapter in her life, he wondered if his role in her story would change. But Meadow made sure to remind him that family, true family, never fades. A few weeks after the wedding, Vin received an unexpected call from Meadow. He was on set, preparing for a new scene, when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Seeing her name flash on the screen, he immediately excused himself and stepped outside into the fresh air before answering. "Hey, kiddo," he greeted warmly. "Everything okay?" Meadow's voice was light, filled with happiness. "Everything's great. I wanted to check in, see how you're doing." "Was good." "Me? You just got married, and you're calling to check on me? Shouldn't it be the other way around?" "Well, you know me," she teased. "I like to keep you on your toes." They shared a laugh, and for a moment, it felt like no time had passed between them. But then Meadow's voice softened. "Uncle Vin, I was thinking, I want to do something special, something to honor my dad." Vin leaned against a nearby trailer, sensing the weight behind her words. "I'm listening." "I want to start a foundation in his name," she said. "Something that carries on his passion for the ocean, for helping others. He always wanted to make a real difference, and I think it's time I help make that dream come true." Vin felt a surge of pride swell in his chest. Meadow, that's an incredible idea. Your dad would love that. She hesitated before continuing. And I was hoping you'd help me. Vin didn't even need to think about it. Of course. You know I've got your back, always. Her relieved sigh echoed through the phone. I knew you'd say that. Thank you, Uncle Vin. The next few months were a whirlwind of planning. Meadow, with Vin's unwavering support, began laying the groundwork for what would become the Paul Walker Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to ocean conservation and providing aid to communities in need. Vin used his connections in Hollywood to help secure funding, reaching out to fellow actors, producers, and philanthropists who had known and admired Paul. With every meeting, every conversation, it became clearer that Paul's impact had never truly faded. People still spoke of his kindness, his generosity, and his unwavering love for the planet. And now, through Meadow, that legacy was growing stronger. As the official launch date approached, Meadow asked Vin to be a guest speaker at the inaugural event. He initially hesitated, unsure if he could find the right words, but Meadow reassured him with a simple truth. Just speak from the heart. That's what Dad always did. The night of the Foundation's launch was nothing short of magical. Held in a grand yet intimate venue overlooking the ocean, the event was a gathering of friends, family, and supporters who all shared one common goal: to honor Paul's vision. Vin stood at the podium, gazing out at the faces before him. Meadow sat in the front row, her eyes locked onto his, silently encouraging him. He took a deep breath, then began to speak. Paul was more than a friend to me. He was my brother. We spent years racing cars on screen, but off screen, he was racing towards something far more important: making the world a better place. He didn't just talk about change, he lived it. He inspired it. The room was silent, every ear hanging onto his words. And now, his legacy lives on through Meadow, through all of us. This foundation isn't just about remembering Paul. It's about continuing the work he started. Because if he were here, he wouldn't want us to dwell on the past. He wants us to keep moving forward, to keep fighting for what matters. He looked down at Meadow, his voice thick with emotion. And I know he's looking down right now, proud beyond words of the incredible woman his daughter has become. Tears shimmered in Meadow's eyes as the room erupted into applause. She stood and embraced Vin, holding on to him tightly. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Vin held her close, knowing that their journey together had not ended. It had only evolved. As the years passed, the Paul Walker Foundation flourished. Meadow and Vin continued their work, ensuring that Paul's passion lived on in ways he would have been proud of. And through it all, their bond remained unbreakable. One day, as they walked along a sunlit beach after a charity event, Meadow glanced at Vin with a thoughtful expression. You know, Uncle Vin, she said, I used to think that losing my dad meant I'd always have this empty space in my life. But then I realized something. That space was never empty. You were always there. Vin stopped, his heart swelling. Meadow. She cut him off with a small smile. You never replaced him. You never tried to. But you made sure I never felt alone. And that means everything. Vin exhaled slowly, his eyes glistening. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. And I'll always show up for you. Meadow nodded, linking her arm through his as they continued walking, the waves crashing gently beside them. Because love, loyalty, and family, those were the things that truly lasted forever. Years had passed since that unforgettable wedding day when Vin Diesel walked Meadow Walker down the aisle, fulfilling a promise made long ago. The seasons had changed, but one thing remained constant: his unwavering commitment to being there for her, no matter what. Their bond had transcended time, proving that family was not merely defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and the willingness to stand beside one another through every chapter of life. As Meadow settled into married life, she continued her philanthropic work through the Paul Walker Foundation, dedicating her time and passion to causes her father had held dear. Vin was always close by, cheering her on, ensuring she had all the support she needed to thrive. Though she was a strong, independent woman, she never hesitated to turn to him for guidance. He had become her rock, just as Paul had once been for so many people. One evening, as they sat together at a quiet beachfront restaurant, Meadow placed her hand over Vin's and smiled. "I have something to tell you," she said, her eyes shimmering with excitement. Vin arched an eyebrow, curiosity lighting his face. "Good news, I hope." She nodded. "Very good news." Taking a deep breath, she whispered, "I'm going to be a mother." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Vin stared at her, processing the words, feeling a rush of emotions flood through him. Then his face broke into the widest grin, and he let out a deep, joyous laugh before pulling her into a tight embrace. "Meadow, that's amazing," he exclaimed. "Your dad would be so proud." She held on to him, letting a tear slip down her cheek. "I was hoping you'd say that. I want my child to grow up knowing about him, about the love he had for this world. And I want them to know you." Vince swallowed the lump in his throat. "You know I'll be here every step of the way, just like I always have been." As Meadow's pregnancy progressed, Vin took on yet another role in her life. Not just as an uncle or father figure, but as someone who would be a guiding presence in the life of her child. He helped her set up the nursery, picked out books Paul would have loved to read, and shared memories that she could one day pass on to her little one. On the day of the baby's birth, Vin was right there, pacing outside the hospital room, just as nervous and excited as any grandfather to be. When he finally got to hold the newborn in his arms, his heart swelled with indescribable love. "Welcome to the family, little one," he whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to the baby's forehead. "You've got a guardian angel watching over you already." Meadow, exhausted yet glowing with happiness, looked at Vin with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." Vin chuckled, shaking his head. "Kid, you've always had the strength. I just made sure you never forgot it." As the years passed, Meadow's child grew up surrounded by stories of Paul Walker, his kindness, his passion, his legacy. And at every turn, Vin Diesel was there, playing the role of mentor, protector, and beloved family member. Together, they ensured that Paul's spirit lived on, not just in the movies he had made, but in the lives he had touched and the love that continued to grow within their family. One evening, as Vin sat on a porch watching the sunset with Meadow and her child, she reached over and took his hand. "You kept your promise, Uncle Vin," she said softly. "And then some." He looked at her, his heart full. "Family is forever, Meadow, no matter what." And with that, they watched the sky darken, knowing that no matter where life took them, they would always have each other. Because family wasn't just about where you came from. It was about who you chose to stand by. And Vin Diesel had never once let go.